Sorry in advance for this one. What the hell's wrong with people, man? In July of 2023, a 31-year-old man identified in reports as Mr. Liu was admitted to a hospital in China after experiencing severe abdominal pain, sweating, and signs of infection. You probably know where this is going. Doctors discovered he had inserted a live eel into his anus, which then forced its way through his rectum and colon. The eel used its sharp teeth to bite through his intestinal wall, causing a perforation that allowed bacteria and fecal matter to leak into his abdominal cavity, triggering life-threatening peritonitis. CT scans showed the eel moving inside his abdomen before surgeons performed emergency surgery. During the operation, they found the eel had punctured through the colon and entered the abdominal cavity. The eel was removed and the damaged sections of intestine were repaired, while surgeons cleaned out contamination to prevent further infection. He survived after intensive treatment, but doctors noted that without rapid surgical intervention, the injuries would have quickly led to organ failure and an extremely painful death. This was the terrifying moment a textile factory worker suddenly got pulled into a rope winding machine. As the machine spun, the rope wrapped around his leg and dragged him toward the rollers in a split second. Luckily, the coworker by his side quickly hit the emergency stop just in time, likely saving him from a horrific death. Someone in Birmingham, Alabama was suddenly woken up by this life-threatening scene. A massive branch that crashed through the roof during intense storms. In something straight out of Final Destination, they were only feet away from being impaled in their sleep. This was the intense moment a foundry worker unknowingly dumped wet scrap metal into a furnace using a forklift. When water touches molten metal, it instantly flashes into steam and expands violently, triggering a powerful steam explosion. Immediately after the scrap is dumped, the furnace erupts in a sudden burst of steam and molten metal. The driver's forklift is briefly surrounded by the splash, but he miraculously manages to reverse away and somehow avoids any serious injuries.
How our legal system.
That was the moment a father snapped in court after learning how Larry Nassar had abused all three of his daughters. During a 2018 sentencing hearing in Charlotte, Randall Margrave suddenly lunged at Nassar after being denied his request to have 5 minutes alone with him. His daughters had each been abused under the guise of treatment, part of a disturbing pattern that spanned years and targeted hundreds of young female athletes. For decades, Nassar had been a trusted doctor for USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University, treating many elite athletes, including Olympians. But behind that reputation, he was sexually abusing girls during supposed medical procedures, often without gloves, and sometimes even with parents in the room convincing them it was necessary. Complaints dated back to the 1990s, but institutions repeatedly failed to act. It wasn't until 2016, when multiple women came forward publicly, that the full scale of the disgusting abuse was finally exposed. More than 250 victims eventually gave statements describing years of manipulation and sexual assault. In 2018, Nassar was sentenced to up to 175 years in prison. The case exposed massive institutional failures, led to high-level resignations, and resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements for victims. In July of 2023, while incarcerated at a penitentiary in Florida, Nassar was stabbed multiple times by another inmate during an altercation, suffering serious injuries including a collapsed lung, but survived after being hospitalized. The disgusting little rat will remain in prison for the rest of his life. Sao Paulo, Brazil, 1990. A botched robbery leads to a hostage situation, resulting in a tense standoff with police. The would-be thief brandishly holds a gun against the head of his terrified captive as the scene quickly draws a crowd. The standoff continues for more than 2 hours as authorities desperately contemplate how to handle the situation. Then suddenly, local police hatch a daring plan. An undercover police sergeant holding a camera poses as a reporter, and in a split second he seizes control of the weapon before other officers are able to rush in. The hostage was rescued completely unharmed while the suspect was taken into custody. This is why you should never wear AirPods while wandering around a train station. This Turkish woman was a split second from being clapped by a passing train if it wasn't for a rail worker pulling her away just in time. She very easily could have been pulled under the tram and suffered a serious leg injury or worse. This man was taking a casual stroll in Nepal when he was suddenly met by something shocking: a massive rhino chasing him down. While attacks like this are rare, rhinos are responsible for an estimated 2 to 3 human deaths each year, usually when people unknowingly wander too close or startle them. Known for their poor eyesight but extremely sharp hearing and smell, rhinos can charge at speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, leaving almost no time to react once they lock onto a target. The fate of the man in this video is unknown. During a live Argentine league match between Estudiantes and Vélez Sarsfield, a green laser was repeatedly pointed at the goalkeeper while play was ongoing, briefly disrupting him during key moments. But broadcast cameras tracked the source in the stands and sniped the fan in real time, still holding the laser pointer before she realized she was on the big screen. She was later identified as Delfina Quiroga, a die-hard Estudiantes fan from La Plata. Argentine media reported that her father is a local prosecutor, and despite the visibility of the incident, she was not criminally charged. However, authorities in the club are expected to issue a stadium ban that could last up to 2 years, since using laser pointers during matches is considered a safety violation and interference with play. In 1980 in Florida, 19-year-old Mark DeFries was arrested for taking his deceased father's tools from a school workshop. He was initially sentenced to 4 years, but spent over 30 years in prison after repeatedly escaping. An autistic savant, DeFries became known for building tools from basic scraps, picking locks, and even climbing razor wire fences. Each escape added more time, while prison officials punished him with extreme isolation, totaling an estimated 10,000 plus hours in solitary confinement. Despite being nonviolent, his sentence kept growing until he was finally released on parole in 2019. Manute Bol, one of the tallest players in NBA history at 7'7", lived through extreme hardship long before playing basketball. He reportedly witnessed villages in Sudan being attacked during the Second Sudanese Civil War and claimed he once killed a lion with a spear as a teenager. After making it to the NBA, Bol earned millions, but gave away most of his money to support refugees and humanitarian efforts in Sudan, often leaving himself nearly broke. In 2010, he suddenly became ill after returning from Africa. Doctors diagnosed him with acute kidney failure and Stevens-Johnson syndrome, a rare and life-threatening condition that causes the skin to blister and peel away. He died at just 47 years old, with much of his body covered in painful lesions from the disease. In the United States, lumber baron Wellington R. Burt died in 1919 with an estate worth around $100 million, but none of it went to his children or grandchildren. His will included a spite clause ordering the fortune be withheld until 21 years after the death of his last surviving grandchild who was alive at the time of his death. Because of that condition, all of his children and every one of those grandchildren died before the money was ever released. The estate wasn't settled until 2011, nearly a century later, leaving the fortune to distant descendants who had never even known him. In August of 2023 in Maceió, Brazil, 27-year-old Fernanda Silva Veloz de Cruz Pinto accepted a piece of chocolate from an elderly fortune teller who had just warned her she only had a few days left to live. Trusting it because it was sealed and fearing for her life, she ate it, then within hours began vomiting, losing vision, and texting family members about a bitter taste and racing heart. She was rushed to the hospital but died in agonizing pain the next day. Toxicology later found high levels of pesticides in her body, and police investigated whether the chocolate had been deliberately poisoned, but the case remains unresolved. In 1987, in Cameron Highlands, Malaysia, Sultan Iskandar of Johor, who later became King of Malaysia, was accused of beating a golf caddy to death after the man allegedly laughed at a bad shot. At the time, Malaysian rulers had legal immunity, so no charges were brought despite public outrage. The incident became one of several controversies that led to the country stripping its royalty of immunity in 1993, allowing future rulers to be prosecuted like ordinary citizens. Simon Cowell once admitted he went so far with Botox and facial fillers that he no longer recognized his own face in photos. After years of cosmetic treatments gradually altered his features into something noticeably unnatural. Experts have suggested the buildup of filler can distort facial structure and even affect how fluid drains from the face, giving a permanently swollen, tightened look that's essentially impossible to undo. The moment it hit him was when even his own son reacted to how different he looked, forcing him to confront just how far his appearance had drifted from what it once was. Seattle artist Sunday Nobody spent $25,000 creating a bronze statue, combining the ancient Greek Discobolus with the face of handsome Squidward. He consulted archaeologists to ensure it could withstand long-term underwater conditions, then deliberately sank it about 9 meters deep in the Mediterranean Sea, so it could potentially be discovered in the future as a convincing artifact. This executioner's sword from the late 17th century Germany was engraved with the words, "When I raise this sword, so I wish that this poor sinner will receive eternal life." The Creel Mound in what is now West Virginia, built around 250 BC by the Adena culture, contained a central burial surrounded by multiple skeletons arranged in a circle, with their feet pointed toward the body in the middle. Archaeologists believe the positioning suggests a ritual burial, possibly involving individuals placed around a high-status figure, though the exact circumstances remain unclear. The Celtic carnix was an ancient war horn used by Celtic tribes between 300 BC and 200 AD. It was a long, vertical bronze instrument, often shaped with an animal head at the top, designed to project intimidating sounds across the battlefield. Moments before combat, its eerie, haunting blasts would echo through the air, one of the last sounds Roman soldiers heard before facing their enemies.